Prime Minister Keir Starmer finds himself drowning in a political crisis that threatens to define his entire premiership. What began as a collapsed espionage case has evolved into something far more damaging, a complete breakdown of trust between the government and the public. The pressure has become so unbearable that Starmer has taken the unprecedented step of releasing classified witness statements in what many see as a desperate attempt to salvage his reputation. However, this extraordinary move appears to have spectacularly backfired, creating more questions than answers. The scandal centers around two British men, Christopher Cash and Christopher Barry, who faced charges under the Official Secrets Act for allegedly passing sensitive information to Chinese intelligence operatives. Cash had worked as a parliamentary researcher with connections to prominent Conservative MPs, Tom Tugendhat and Alicia Kearns, while Barry was employed as a teacher. From the moment charges were filed, both men vehemently maintained their innocence. The case took an extraordinary turn last month when the Crown Prosecution Service made the stunning decision to drop all charges against both defendants. Their justification sent shockwaves through Westminster. They claimed the government had failed to demonstrate that China represented a genuine threat to UK national security during the period when the alleged offenses occurred. Consider the implications of this statement. The prosecution service was essentially declaring that the British government couldn't establish China as a national security threat. Despite years of documented cyber attacks, intellectual property theft, and systematic espionage operations targeting Western nations, the collapse triggered immediate political warfare. Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch launched a devastating attack, accusing Starmer's administration of deliberately undermining the case to protect lucrative trade relationships with Beijing. These weren't minor political jabs, they were serious allegations questioning the government's commitment to national security. For weeks, Starmer attempted to shift responsibility onto the previous Conservative administration. He argued that the Tories had failed to properly designate China as a threat during their tenure, creating an insurmountable legal obstacle for the prosecution. This deflection convinced nobody. Critics rightly pointed out that as the current Prime Minister, Starmer bore ultimate responsibility for ensuring successful prosecution of national security cases, regardless of inherited policies. The situation has become emblematic of a deeper problem within this government. Many observers now believe that where politicians directly lie to the people without even attempting to disguise it.
You know, they've turned lying into an art form. I've never known a government like, I've seen a few governments, I've seen a few prime ministers in my overly long life. This is the worst one ever. I've never seen a prime minister and a cabinet who just lie. They just lie and they lie and they lie. In the past, it's been quite painful to see prime ministers as they circuitously try to skirt round the truth. But they always stopped at directly lying to the people. They were careful about that. It was part and parcel of the culture of politics, of British politics. Now we have a government, they just lie to us.
Keir Starmer could catch on fire in the House of Commons and would just deny it. I mean, it's just ridiculous. We've reached a point of absolute lying, and it's not sustainable. Of course, politics involves a certain degree of illusion and, controlling issues. And even Churchill couldn't admit war secrets because they were operationally important to our safety during the Second World War. So he had to, from a certain point of view, lie. But this is beyond a joke. They just lie about everything. Apparently, the migrants are now all going to need A-level English. I mean, this is just rubbish. We know it's not going to happen. You're just lying. And there is this old quote about a Marxist Soviet state, which is that they lie, we know they lie, they know we know they lie, and then they carry on lying. And yet we're a democracy who appear to have accidentally become a Marxist dictatorship with the least impressive dictator anyone's ever seen. I mean, he's just rubbish.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's very sort of Eastern European socialist, Soviet sort of behaviour, where, politicians directly lie to the people. The people know that they're lying, but they have to pretend that they're not lying. The difference being is we still have a vaguely free society here, so they lie to us. We know that they're lying to us, and unlike in Russia, we actually say so. And we call them out because their lies remind me of it like kids who haven't done their homework.
This pattern of deception has eroded public trust to unprecedented levels. creating a crisis of legitimacy that extends far beyond this single case. During successive prime ministers' question sessions, Badenoch relentlessly pressed Starmer on his handling of the situation. She painted a picture of a prime minister more concerned with appeasing China than protecting British interests. Media scrutiny intensified, with journalists questioning whether political calculations had influenced the decision to abandon the prosecution. Starmer's approval ratings began a steady decline as public perception crystallized around his apparent weakness on national security. Then came an extraordinary development that further damaged the government's credibility. Officials claimed the Crown Prosecution Service was blocking publication of crucial witness statements that would vindicate their position. The CPS immediately contradicted this claim, stating unequivocally that the statements belonged to the government and that publication decisions rested entirely with them. This unprecedented public disagreement between government departments created an impression of chaos and incompetence. The international dimension of this scandal cannot be ignored, while Starmer struggles with basic security prosecutions, making him appear weak and ineffective on the world stage.
Where's the United Kingdom? Where's Russia? Where? Come here. Is everything going good?
Very good.
That's very nice that you're here. These people all came in like 20-minute notice, and I think it's fantastic. And we have so many others, and just so many others.
Oh dear, I think he thought he was going to have his little moment and he was going to speak. You're not speaking, Keir. You had nothing to do with it. In fact, the likes of Keir Starmer, Emmanuel Macron from France, our own Prime Minister Albanese, really, they did not help this peace deal. They, if anything, set it back. And Marco Rubio made that point, didn't he? That every time one of them would pull a stunt, recognise the Palestinian state, the Palestinians would walk away from the negotiating table.
This moment, from a leadership perspective, belongs to President Trump. Everybody knows it, whether they admit it with celebration or they admit it begrudgingly. But you'll find these other people who want to sort of just steal a little bit of the credit. It's these world leaders. It's the Biden administration people were all over TV yesterday saying how they came up with the framework and they're glad to see that Trump and his team implemented the framework they were the originators of. So they're all kind of trying to do that. But everyone knows, and that's why you see him really seizing this moment. And if I were Keir Starmer, I might have come up with something a little bit different, like half a step back, stay in the frame, as opposed to completely turning his back and going that way. That didn't look good.
This perception of weakness invites further challenges to British interests and undermines the count, tries standing among allies. Facing mounting accusations of a cover-up, Starmer finally relented. During a tense Prime Minister's question session on Wednesday, he announced the full publication of the witness statements. Even this announcement was mishandled, with Starmer appearing defensive and irritable, accusing the opposition of exploiting national security for political gain. He insisted the statements had been prepared without political interference and would vindicate his position. The statements, released late Wednesday evening, immediately created fresh problems. Authored by Matthew Collins, the Deputy National Security Advisor, they did acknowledge China as a threat to UK security. Collins described China as presenting the most significant state-based threat to Britain's economic security and revealed that UK democratic institutions, including the Electoral Commission, had been targeted by large-scale Chinese espionage campaigns. Yet this revelation created a fundamental contradiction. If these statements clearly identified China as a threat, why did the CPS claim insufficient evidence existed? The Director of Public Prosecutions had explained that evidence needed to demonstrate China's threat status at the specific time of the alleged offenses. Despite months of attempts to obtain additional evidence, nothing meeting this requirement had been provided. This discrepancy reveals either that the government's witness statements were legally inadequate or that the CPS imposed unreasonable evidence requirements. Neither scenario reflects well on governmental competence. An inability to meet basic legal standards suggests fundamental misunderstanding of prosecution requirements. Alternatively, if the CPS was being unreasonable, it indicates the government lacks control over its own prosecution service. The published statements created an even more damaging revelation. Conservative leader Badenoch identified language in one statement that appeared directly lifted from the Labour Party manifesto, describing the current government's China policy. This flatly contradicted Starmer's assertion that the statements reflected conservative policy and had been prepared without political interference. Badenoch seized upon this contradiction with surgical precision. She demonstrated that while Starmer claimed the statements reflected conservative policy, at least one had clearly been prepared under his government and incorporated Labour's policy positions. This suggested Starmer had either deliberately misled Parliament or fundamentally misunderstood his own officials' actions. The statements also exposed the government's confused China strategy. While acknowledging China as a major threat, they simultaneously emphasized pursuing positive relations to strengthen cooperation and stability. They outlined Labour's 3Cs approach: cooperation on shared interests, competition in other areas, and challenge on security issues. This contradictory messaging perfectly encapsulates the government's fundamental problem: attempting to treat China as both a serious security threat and a valuable economic partner. The timing couldn't be worse for Starmer's embattled administration. Already facing criticism over domestic policy failures, he now appears incapable of handling basic security matters, while other nations are working together to achieve historic peace agreements.
And, Mr. Speaker, let no one be any doubt that none of this would have been possible without President Trump. This is his peace deal, delivered, of course, with President Sisi of Egypt, the Emir of Qatar, and President Erdogan of Turkey.
Britain looks increasingly isolated and irrelevant on the global stage. This scandal reveals systemic problems in how the government handles classified information and legal processes. A major espionage case collapsing due to inadequate government evidence suggests serious institutional failures. Either security services don't understand persecutoria, LA requirements, political leadership isn't providing proper support, or both problems exist simultaneously. The international implications are profound. Other nations are watching Britain's handling of Chinese espionage attempts closely. If the message is that trade relationships take precedence over prosecuting spies, it will encourage more aggressive intelligence operations against UK targets. Allied nations may question whether Britain can be trusted with sensitive intelligence if it cannot successfully prosecute its own espionage cases. The controversy shows no signs of abating. Conservatives demand publication of additional documents, including what they term the China files. They want full transparency regarding all correspondence related to the case and clarity about who made the decisions leading to its collapse. Starmer's hope that publishing witness statements would end the controversy has proven misguided. It has instead opened new avenues of attack. The central question remains unanswered. Was this case deliberately sabotaged for political reasons, or does it reflect simple incompetence? Either answer severely damages Starmer. Deliberate sabotage would mean prioritizing trade over security. Incompetence would mean he cannot be trusted with complex security matters. Neither conclusion inspires confidence in his leadership. The broader context amplifies this scandal's significance. Britain faces escalating security challenges from China, Russia, and other hostile states. The public expects robust prosecution of those who betray British interests. When major espionage cases collapse due to government failures, it undermines confidence in the entire security apparatus. Starmer's crisis management has exposed his political inexperience. Rather than taking responsibility and explaining what went wrong, he has spent weeks deflecting blame and avoiding accountability. This defensive approach has intensified the scandal and created an impression of concealment. A more seasoned politician might have controlled the narrative more effectively. The witness statement's publication was intended as Starmer's decisive move to end the controversy. Instead, it has created new problems and raised additional questions. The contradictions within the statements, the confused China messaging, and evidence of political interference have provided his opponents with fresh ammunition. What was meant to resolve the crisis has instead prolonged and intensified it. This scandal highlights the challenge any government faces balancing security concerns with economic interests. China represents both Britain's largest trading partner and its most significant security threat. Managing this paradox requires sophisticated strategic thinking and political skill. Starmer's government appears to possess neither, resulting in a policy approach that satisfies nobody and achieves nothing. The impact on Britain's intelligence and security services could prove lasting. If they cannot rely on governmental support for prosecuting foreign spies, they may become reluctant to pursue such cases. This could foster a culture of impunity, encouraging more aggressive espionage operations against British targets. The damage to morale and operational effectiveness could take years to repair. As this crisis continues unfolding, it becomes increasingly clear that Starmer has catastrophically mishandled a critical national security issue. His attempts to avoid responsibility and blame others have failed spectacularly, and his credibility on security matters lies in ruins. The publication of witness statements, rather than resolving the controversy, has highlighted the government's confusion and incompetence. This is precisely the kind of crisis that can destroy a prime minister's reputation and determine their political fate. And at this moment, Keir Starmer is losing badly.